So this is our last section of chapter 1. We'll spend today and tomorrow on it. Tomorrow we'll look at irregular shapes, or if they have shaded regions like cut out of them, so some complex figures. Today's just simple. So we're looking at our perimeter and circumference of two-dimensional shapes, and also areas. So the first vocabulary word is the perimeter of a polygon. Okay. A triangle is a polygon with 3 sides. Okay. So you could also have a pentagon, which is a polygon with 5 sides. All you have to do is sum up the lengths of the sides. So add them together. When you're talking about a circle, though, we call it the circumference because you can't add up a round side. So instead of perimeter of a circle, we'll use circumference, which is the distance around. And then last vocabulary is the area of a polygon, is the number of square units that fit inside of it. So this one asks us to find the perimeter and the area of this rectangle. So you can see that this has 3 units along this side and 3 units here. 6 units and 6 units. So when we add those all together, what is my perimeter going to be? 18. Now whenever you use a unit, let's just say these were inches. Your units would be just inches. We added inches plus inches plus inches gets me inches. Now, whenever I find the area, okay, we will talk about a formula most of you know, just to multiply length by width. Okay, you also could technically count the number of squares since I have the squares here in the picture. But whenever we multiply 6 by 3, we're going to get 18 again. But area has to be in square units. So this would be in square inches, which you can either write out with inches squared, or you could actually write out as square inches if you really wanted to. Most people don't want to do that. But you want to be really careful with your units because on our test next week, sometimes they'll ask you for perimeter or area. Your units will matter. Okay? So here are our formulas. These also need to be memorized if they aren't already. So the perimeter of a square is 4s. Again, you could just add up all the sides. But this is one that works because a square has 4 congruent sides. So instead of adding like 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, you could just do 4 times 2. The area of a square is just to multiply the length and the width, which happen to be the same number, like 5 squared or 6 squared. Now for the rectangle, our book uses B and H. Most of you are more familiar with L and W, right? So if you want, you can think of this as length and width, which would be and instead of B and H. It doesn't matter which one you prefer. But the perimeter would be twice the length because you have 2 lengths and 2 widths. And the area, again, is to multiply the 2 dimensions together. And then the circle, this is the one that students somehow screw up. They mix up the formulas. Okay. Circumference is either pi d or 2 pi r, which I suggest memorizing the 2 pi r one, because more often than not, sometimes I'll give you the circumference and ask you to find the radius, and that's the more user-friendly one. So if you want to just memorize one. And area is pi r squared. And every year, like even later on in the year, students will mix these formulas up. One way to remember them is that, remember, area is square units, inches squared, feet squared, so it is the one that has the r squared in it, just to help remind you of that. All right, so this first one says, your pool is 15 feet wide and 20 feet long, and I should tell you that, oh, it does tell you, it is rectangular, with a 3-foot wide deck around it. You want to build a fence around the deck. How much fencing would you need? Okay, so the first thing I would probably do is draw a picture. We're going to need 2 rectangles, one to represent the pool, and then one that's bigger than it to represent the deck. And just to save myself time there. I even filled it in. Looks like a pool. There's water. Give you guys a second to drop that down. Yours does not have to be colored. And then we'll label the information they give us. So it's 15 feet wide by 20 feet long. It doesn't matter which one you put them on. Okay. Now the deck around it is 3 feet wide everywhere. Okay, so it's 3 feet here, 3 feet here, 3 feet here, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Okay, so we want to put a fence around the outside of this part. So we need to figure out how long this whole side is and how long this whole side is. Now the mistake students will tell me is that this whole side is 23. Because they're like, I'm adding 3 feet. Why is that wrong? Yep. Good. You're adding 3 feet here, and you're adding 3 feet here. You have a 3-foot deck on both sides of that pool. So it should not be 23. It should be 26. Again, that was 20 plus 3. And then our top part would be 15 plus 3 plus 3, which gets me my 21 feet. So now, am I going to find, now that I have my new dimensions, am I going to find the perimeter, or am I going to find the area? I want to find out how much fencing. Right. Good, I'm finding the perimeter. And you have 2 options. You can use the formula, or you could add up all the sides. If you want to use the formula, you'll double them and then add them. So we let our length be the 20, so that would be 2 times 26 plus 2 times 21. And then you want to make sure you use your order of operations, multiply first, and then add those together. And what kind of units would I have on this? Of units. Yep.
Feet.
Regular feet. See if you guys can try example 2 on the back, which is similar with a picture frame instead of a pool. Hello? Alright, so you can tell me what they got for the picture, or perimeter of the picture itself, without the frame. What do we get for the perimeter of just this part? Justin? Good, 26 inches. Again, just doing 2 times 7 plus 2 times 6. And then how about the perimeter of the frame? The perimeter of the frame. Maddie? 30. Very good. So since this was 7 and we're adding a half and a half, that's like adding 1, which is 8. And this one would be 7. Very good. All right, now circumference, you're going to see that pi in our formulas. Okay, so all of the formulas for a circle involve that pi feature. So if you were asked to leave your answer in terms of pi, which you'll do a lot this year, you just leave the pi in your answer. So for example, if I told you that the radius was 5, and I asked you to find the circumference, you would plug in 5. So that's 2, technically times pi, times 5. You would just multiply the 2 and 5 together and you get 10. And you would leave it 10 pi. So if they say leave it in terms of pi, you leave pi in your answer. Now pi is not a unit, like centimeters, feet, whatever. It's a number, 3.14, etc. But oftentimes they'll ask you to leave it in terms of pi so that you don't have to round your answer, and this is much more accurate than typing it in your calculator and rounding it. Okay. You may also use the pi key on your calculator, or if you for some reason don't have the pi key, because I know some people bought like a simple calculator that doesn't have one, you can type in 3.14 as an estimation. Okay. Using the pi key is the most accurate tool. And then rounding it after that, because it will give you all those decimals in your calculator. And depending on which calculator you have, the pi key on the graphing calculators is right above the caret. So you would have to press second caret to get your pi key. If everyone can get their calculator out and look at it and make sure they know where it is. So if you don't, I can show it to you today because you'll need it. And so even though your calculator looks like it stops at the 4, it actually stores the whole number in there so that it gives you a more accurate answer than if we were just to type in 3.14. So just showing you like the difference between, let's do 5 pi versus 5 times 3.14. You can see that there's a lot of numbers that you're dropping off whenever you round. Anyone not see the pi key on their calculator? Anyone else? All good? Okay. All right, so the questions here ask us to first find the circumference of, and you'll see this says circle A, in terms of pi, then find it to the nearest tenth. So we're going to get an answer like this, then we're going to type it in the calculator, so we'll have two versions of the same answer. So finding the circumference, you can again either use your 2 pi r formula or your pi d formula, it doesn't matter. But the 2 pi r one is, if you want to just memorize one, that's the one you want to memorize. Practice use more often. Now 12, what is 12 representing in this circle? The diameter. So technically if you were doing the formulas, this would be the better one. Otherwise, you would have to cut this in half to find out that the radius was 6 and plug it into that formula. Okay, so one or the other. Again, pi is not a unit. It's a number, so you still need units. So circumference is talking about the distance around. So if you were to take a piece of string and like wrap it around, then take that string off and hold it on a ruler or meter stick and measure how long it is. So this circumference should be in just inches. So you still need a unit after the pi symbol. Then they want us to find it to the nearest tenth. So now we'll go to our calculator and we'll type in 12 pi, hit enter, and who could round that properly to the nearest tenth?
37.7.
Good, 37.7, and that would be again inches. So same answer, just two different forms. All right, see if you guys can try 4 and 5 right below. And then we'll look in the coordinate plane. And then we'll do the half sheet that actually has some challenging problems because these should be all really easy. So the directions for number 4 changed. It said just leave it in terms of pi. So you didn't have to do the decimal approximation for pi. So who can tell me what they got for number 4 with correct units? So circumference should be, Marquise?
The circumference equals 41 inches.
I want it in terms of pi. So I think you typed it in your calculator. What did you get before you typed it?
36.
Good. 36 pi, and this should be in with meters. Okay, so since it said in terms of pi, I'm not typing that in my calculator at all. It didn't say both forms this time. Now the next one does want me to round to the nearest tenth. If it tells you nearest tenth, that means plug it in your calculator. Okay, so just so you guys can see the difference in the directions. So when we typed that into our calculator, what did we get rounded to the nearest tenth? Maddie? Good. 56.5, and that's also in meters. Okay. All right, the last one then we see on here is finding perimeter in the coordinate plane. So they give us a triangle. Find the perimeter of triangle ABC. So for perimeter of a triangle, there's not a formula. You just add the 3 sides, okay? So there is 2 ways you can do this problem. Now it is a right triangle, which does make it a little bit easier. We need to find out how long the sides are. Now because these are going horizontally and vertically, we can probably just count how many spaces or how far away is -1 from 5 because these are this way. So if you want, you can count your spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or again, you could take 5 minus a -1, which would get me that that's 6 units long. And how long would this side be? Justin? 8 units. Okay. If you didn't notice that, or if they weren't horizontal and vertical, you could do the distance formula twice. Really time consuming, right? But if it weren't a right triangle, you would have to. Now, we cannot just count diagonal spaces. Okay? So you have 2 options to find the length of this side. One is the distance formula. What's the other one? Right. Pythagorean theorem. Which is your a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which everyone should know from algebra, right? I'm thinking the Pythagorean theorem is going to be shorter. So let's go with that. So this would be my A, this would be my B. Remember that those are the legs. C is always going to be your hypotenuse, or the longest side across from the right angle, so we would plug in. Square each number. 36 plus 64 will get me 100. Does that mean that the distance is 100? No. Good. We have to then undo a square with a square root. Technically, Brett, plus or minus 10. But because we are in the coordinate plane and we are talking about the length, we are only going to take the positive answer. And so now we're just going to add those 3 sides together. And we'll just say units because we don't know if they're inches or what. Now again, if this were not a right triangle, let's suppose the triangle looked like this. You would have to do the distance formula 1, 2, 3 times, and then add them together. That would be for your area. Okay, so if I were asking you like how much space was inside the shape, the area for a triangle is 1/2 times space times height. But when you're finding perimeter, you're just finding the distance around. So two different variables. But yes, you could actually find, if you were doing the area, you could find like a whole rectangle and then cut that in half. That's where that formula comes from. Good question. All right. Now let's go to our extra examples. If we have time, we'll come back to the closure. But I wanted to do some harder problems because all the other ones I feel like you could have done without me, really. And I didn't hole punch this because it's a half sheet, but if anyone wants to come up later and try to study some hole punch, you can. So you want to keep these. You don't want to lose them. So it says, if the circumference of a circle is 28 pi, find the area of the circle. All right, so looking at the question, first of all, they want me to find the area of the circle. So I'm going to jot down the area formula. Area of the circle is pi r squared. In order to plug into this formula, I need to know the radius. Right now, they didn't give me the radius, right? They gave me the circumference. But what I can do is I can solve backwards from the circumference, figure out what the radius is. So I'm also going to jot down the circumference formula over here. Now again, there's pi d or 2 pi r, but since I want to find the radius, I'm going to use the 2 pi r formula. And they've told me that the circumference is 28 pi. So 28 pi is going to go in for C. That's why you always want to make sure that you have an equal sign with something on the other side. You don't just want to write down 2 pi r, 2 pi r, 2 pi r. You want c equals 2 pi r. So we'll have 28 pi equals 2 pi r. How would I solve for r? Katie? Perfect. This is multiplication. 2 times pi times r. Inverse of multiplying is to divide. You can divide by 2 and pi at the same time. Remember, pi is just a number. 3.14. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. Pi divided by pi would also be 1, so this would divide out. Now over here, you can actually divide out the pi's because, again, pi divided by pi would be canceling out to be 1. And then 24 divided by 2 would get me 14. So my radius is 14. So now all I have to do is take 14 and plug it in for r. If you can do that without showing all that work, you're not required to. So I know some of you. And they didn't tell us if we want to leave it in terms of pi or not, so let's do both. So 14 squared gets me what? 196. So that would be pi. 196 pi. And, oh, they didn't give me units. So I'll just put units squared. Okay. Area should be square units. Inches squared, centimeters squared, feet squared. They didn't tell me the units, so I'm just going to put units squared. And then let's also estimate that by rounding to the nearest tenth, so we'll get both answers. So 196 pi would be 615.8 square units. Just so you guys can see both answers. But most often you're going to leave it in terms of pi. Okay, now the next one switches gears and it goes into a square. So it says if the area of a square is 144 inches squared, what is the perimeter of the square? So the perimeter of the square, remember a square has 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. So that would be our 4s formula, just multiplying one side length times 4. So we have to figure out what each side length is. We don't know each side length, we know the area though. So the area of a square formula, and sometimes you'll see me do this, like I'll put a little square next to it so you know what formula I'm using, is s squared. So again, we're going to plug the 144. You're not squaring 144, that's just your unit. Just ignore it really when you plug in. We'll plug the 144 in for a, because that is the area. And then we'll solve for each side length. So all we have to do is undo a square with a square root, kind of like we did with that Pythagorean theorem. I would get positive or negative 12, technically, but because we're looking at a side length, we'll only take the positive number, which would be 12 plain old inches. So each of the sides is 12. So you can either add 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, or you can plug into your perimeter formula, which would be 4 times 12, which is 48. And then for perimeter, that's distance around, which is just plain units, so just inches. Okay, there's one more problem I want you guys to try while I pass out your homework. If you flip the little half sheet over, and then I'll show you the answer on the board, but try that one. It's a little bit different. So now in addition to the distance and midpoint formula, you have to memorize these formulas, which most of them I feel like you know already, except maybe the circle. But if you don't know any of them, then you want to memorize those also. Maybe make some flashcards. Or practice writing them every problem in the homework. That'll help you. leave this one in terms of pi. Anyone get it? Jeremiah? 32 pi centimeters. Close, but no. Very close. Joseph?
35 centimeters.
Squared. Yes, it should be 30 instead of 32. Okay, so for this one, they ask you to find the circumference. Again, to find the circumference, we have to find out what the radius is. They gave me the area, so I'm going to start with the area formula. Area equals pi r squared. 225 pi is going in 4a. Okay, so we see pi times radius squared. So we're going to undo first multiplication of pi with division of pi. Those will divide out, those will divide out. So we get 225 equals r squared. Square root, and you can use your calculator, but this is a perfect square. We will get that the radius is 15. Make sure you don't circle that as your final answer. They didn't ask you what the radius was. They asked you what's the circumference. So we plug that back in. 2 times pi times 15 will get me 30 pi. And that would just be regular centimeters. Okay. Again, chapter test is on Tuesday, so if you're struggling, you want to come for help tomorrow. Monday morning's the last day that you can ask questions, so tomorrow morning in homeroom would be a good time to come for extra help.
Only today because of having homework class.
I didn't do it at home because it was slow.
I heard you're doing slow.
Yeah, I didn't do my homework because I thought I could get it done in number.
Ah.